becomes relevant to Southern identity, white Southern identity, after the Civil War, primarily. And so, without going into too much detail, I mean, one of the things to remember is that the Confederacy had a hard time building a sense of nationalism, because they had to do it relatively quickly, during the Civil War. And so white nationalism of the kind that develops around that battle flag is something that happens a little bit later. So it's actually the Southern loss that creates white Southern nationalism.
Interesting.
It's the lost cause. And so that flag then, we see it coming up over and over again as soon as white Southerners see themselves as somehow opposed to, say, the national government or to civil rights, so on and so forth. The middle of the 1890s, which is the height of the disfranchisement of black people in the South. So both the disfranchisement and then also the creation of the Jim Crow regime, which is happening in the 1890s. This is the point where, say, the state of Mississippi adopts the flag, that battle flag. So it's always it always pops back up at certain points where there's either disfranchisement, or there's a struggle for civil rights, or the white Southerners see themselves as somehow in opposition against the national government. So the 1890s in Mississippi, say in the mid-50s in Georgia, I think something like 1956, it appears there, because the Brown decision is 1954. And so 56 is this period of what's called massive resistance to the civil rights movement among white Southerners. And so here it comes again. But you see it among white communities in Detroit. You know what I mean? And so you wonder, what are these people doing? It signifies a certain opposition. But yet, and here's the really bizarre thing, it signifies a certain opposition among people who would just as clearly fly the American flag proudly.
So a lot of the history books that students have been taught out of, and even are taught of here at Belmont, has to do with strongly focusing on the element of slavery and such. A good figure related to that is General Nathan Bedford Forrest, as I'm sure you've heard a lot about. Most people do not want to admit that he was viewed as the first white civil rights activist in Memphis, Tennessee, and that 3,000 African Americans came to his funeral when he died in the 1870s. They don't want that part of the history to be proclaimed because it doesn't support their political views. I'm a member of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and here's a little lapel pin if you want to see it that has I'm the chaplain of the Murfreesboro camp of the SCV right now. I've also been the commander of this in the past. And so basically, the people who misuse that battle flag, that dishonor my ancestors just as much as other people who burn it and tear down statues, we are very upset by this. None of the members of the Sons of Confederate Veterans that I've ever met, and I've been to the national reunion, we hosted it in Murfreesboro in 2012. My camp is one of the largest camps in Murfreesboro of the whole SCV. None of them are racist. A lot of people label us as racist because we revere our ancestors who fought in the Civil War. We live our lives to show that we are not racist. And I think you can ask anyone who knows me, and they'll tell you that I'm not a racist. I'm a biologist and with an interest in history. I don't have a degree in history at all, but I read extensively, especially Civil War history. And I have a presentation that I give because I'm a medical entomologist about insects and disease in the Civil War. I've given it a bunch of times over the last 20 or 30 years. And so that's where my interest really lies is on talking about diseases that insects transmitted and other diseases that soldiers had to face during the war. We had malaria here at the time, for example, and yellow fever in some of the coastal cities.
Neither party has to play to the pro-Confederate flag crowd anymore. As a result, it has become this very reviled symbol, and it's not a symbol that either side really has to pay a lot of attention to, at least as it's manifested in public settings. And I think the turning point for that, I think the watershed for that, was in 2015 with the shootings at the Charleston church. You guys remember? That really, I think, transformed our debates over the Confederate flag. Nikki Haley, who was governor of South Carolina, and you guys may know this already based on the research that you've done, decided to take it down from its very public setting, and that was supported by mainstream establishment Republicans and almost was completely favored by the Democratic establishments, because at that point, the CNN, Fox News, all the major networks are covering the Confederate flag as a political issue after Dylann Roof killed 9 people, I think it was, in that Charleston church, right? And that becomes the big issues. But you also see corporate America turning away from the flag. And Walmart, Amazon, Sears, eBay, all these corporate sponsors begin to line up saying that we're not going to sell anything that mirrors the Confederate flag or that could be considered a Confederate flag on our websites. And then once corporate America begins that turn, then it's really hard for Republican politicians to go against that kind of stream. And back in the 90s, Democrats were worried about losing rural Southern votes, and so they were willing to pander to those votes and not make any really, I think, aggressive moves to pull the flag down. And then that all changes in 2015, to the point now that the Confederate flag has become this repository of evil in political campaigns. It's used by campaigns to bash the other side. The best example of this, I think, is Virginia from last fall in that gubernatorial race.
Is this what Donald Trump and Ed Gillespie mean by the American dream? Latino Victory Fund paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertisement.
So it's obviously about race, but I think it's also to some extent about class. It's this generalized, very broad sense, especially among Southern whites, but I think among working class people everywhere, that we're not going to let the political elite decide what our symbols are. And so there is a large movement on the other side suggesting that they don't see this flag as inherently evil.
It depends. There are some people who use it to be racist. I mean, the flag is, all kinds of things are used by racist people out there to further their agenda. To some people, it is a symbol of pride of their heritage, of a family member that fought. Most of those guys that fought are like in my case, the same way, like ancestors who were poor farmers, being told they got to go fight a rich man's war, basically. The issue of slavery is a rich man's thing, and the poor men ended up having to go deal with that. So to some people, it is heritage, not hate. That is a saying that, because I have mixed emotions about it. I don't condone slavery. I never judge a person by by their race or religion outright. I've got friends of all different walks of life, and I love them. I think it just depends on the context of how you use it. know, these people who walk down the street, you know, with tiki torches and rebel flags are not always the same people who, you know, they hang one in their garage, or I've got mine in my home here. It just depends.